So, first thing first, how are you?
Doing great. We're here, we're in Europe, and we're having fun. We're glad to be back. It's taken us too long.
How did the show go?
Show was awesome.
It was fantastic.
It was really, really, really good. And we haven't been here since we toured Metallica way back 12, 13 years ago. And we weren't sure, if people would know our new stuff, but we saw people singing along to the new stuff. And then, of course, the old stuff really fired them up. So it made us feel really good to be back in Holland.
Well, you mentioned you haven't been back in here for a while in Europe. So why is this? Do you know?
It was, I hate pointing fingers at people, but unfortunately we had a lot of complications with our old manager and our record label. And there was just never any follow-up. There was never any records in the stores. There was never any press. Like, we were out here doing the work with some of the biggest bands, Black Sabbath, Metallica, and there was just no follow-up. There was no support from the label. And it just became really difficult for us to continue to tour out here because we weren't getting any funding. So we had to kind of reassess the whole situation, and we eventually replaced our manager, and we went ahead and straightened things out with our record label. And then, obviously we brought Spine Farm on board, who's been really, a tremendous help to us. And so we're hoping as long as they continue to, do the right things for us out here, so we're visible, then, we want to come here as often as we can because, we have some work to do, but our goal in the end is to be headlining these festivals.
Well, hopefully you will be able to come back soon. What I want to start with is, I'd like to go back a little bit. Sully, you grew up in Boston.
Yep.
Shannon, you didn't.
Right.
But Boston was a heavy influence on the latest album, I believe. So, Shannon, then what's your perspective on the music?
It's funny, I've known Sully since way, way back. I'm talking 25 years ago. We knew each other. He's a drummer in bands, and I was a drummer in bands. And every time I would come to Boston, I'd be excited to see my friend Sully. He would always show up, and we'd go get food, and you know what I mean? So I always looked at Boston as like a place where I had a friend,
right.
And so all the years later, when I joined Godsmack, and I was, I was blessed, I think I told you earlier, I knew I didn't want to move back to Boston, to Boston, only because I don't like cold weather. And at the time I was in California when Sully called me for the Godsmack. But, so I was like, he said, well, you should move to the East Coast, so I ended up in Florida. But the thing I'm trying to get across here is that since I'm in Godsmack, we do a lot of work and we have our own studio in Boston. So I end up spending 2 to 3 months, probably a year up there. And I love the people, I love the city, I love the food is outrageously great. And so I over the years, I feel like, I'm part of that, and I'm part of Godsmack's Boston heritage, and I'm proud to say, like I told him today, I'm like, tell him we're from Boston, Massachusetts, you know what I mean? I'm proud, and I love the way they say they park that car in the garage.
And Sully, for you then, if you go back to when you just started out, what was Boston like to be a rock band? How did you experience it?
Obviously for me, I grew up listening to some of the biggest bands in the world that came from there, like Aerosmith and Jay Giles and Boston themselves. There was so many great bands that came out of there, even like the more mid bands in the punk era and all that stuff with Slapshot and Gangrene and Dropkick Murphys and there's always a great music scene in Boston, but it comes in waves. Sometimes it's really, really good, and then sometimes there's nothing going on. And it's because I think over the years bands develop and then they become really popular, and then the record labels hear about it, they go and they extract everything that's great, and then it settles down until it rebuilds again. So it seems like every so many decades some really strong bands come out of Boston, and for us with our era it was us, and it was Stained and Power Man 5000 and bands like that. So listen, I was born and raised there, I still live there, and Boston in general is just a very proud city, It's one of those things that when you live up in the Northeast, there's just a certain kind of pride that people hold with their town, and Boston for sure is one of them, especially with sports. They're, insane about all their teams.
And they don't pull any punches either. Like, they'll say, I lived in California for 10 years, where people are more plastic, and in Boston they'll tell exactly what they think about you right the minute they meet you. There's no bullshit.
Yeah, we're you know, West Coast is more passive and East Coast is more aggressive.
Absolutely.
You know, so.
So when it came to the record 1,000 Horsepower, what made you decide to have Boston as an inspiration, especially for the song itself?
You know, honestly, that specific song kind of wrote itself. It was really just one of those songs that we were just about done writing the record. We felt that we had the record in a pretty good place. And then we were ordering dinner one day, and as one of our crew guys went out to go get us some food, I was just kind of in the mood to write. I'm like, we haven't like sat in the room yet as a band and wrote, because by the time we joined up after taking a long break, Shannon and Tony had a bunch of songs written that they presented to me, and I had some songs that I brought in, and those are the ones that we kind of worked on. But after we finished all that, and we finished the lyrics, and we kind of had everything in place, we just jamming, you know, and then that song, that riff happened, and then, you know, Shannon jumped in and we all just started jamming it, and then lyrics came very quickly, and once I kind of knew where the direction was going, it was very easy to write it. And I remember thinking, you know what, is this kind of goofy, is it cheesy? But then I'm like, nah, you know, I think it felt right. You know, if we would have wrote that song and the band was only together for 3 years, maybe it would have been too premature. But, you know, after 20 years together, it felt proper to write a song about the band's heritage, because we really looked back at that point and we reflected on 20 years of music, and we're like, you know, wow, if we rewound this back to 1995, like that's where everything started, and who would have known that, you know, here we are 20 years later still playing music.
And then, well, that's what I was going to ask. Did it take you back to that time in your mind, when starting out, and how that felt?
Honestly, every time I sing that song, I think about, you know, there's a street in Boston called Lansdowne Street that has all the little small bars, you know, the little nightclubs and stuff where we used to play, you know, 150, 200 people. And I got to tell you, honestly, every time I sing the lyric, it flashes me there. You know, no matter how big the crowd is now, I get a quick memory of all that. So.
And now after all these years and all the success, then what is it like to play in front of your own hometown? And does that make something?
Well, the last show wasn't too good. Like we had the worst show of our tour, but technical things, you know what I mean? It's just sometimes when you're playing your home show, that seems to be when everything goes wrong, you know? And
it's the one you look forward to the most, so when it goes bad, it's really disappointing. And especially when you're playing a place, like for me, you know, we played this one arena that was the arena I went to see Aerosmith when I was a little kid, and all the big bands, Rush and all that. And you know, you really look forward to it, because you're kind of imagining yourself as that band now that these kids are seeing. And you want it to go perfect. You want to have just as fun as some of the other shows that we play when we go, oh, that was such a good show. And then sometimes it always doesn't go that way. You know, we've had great shows in Boston, but we also had some bad shows in Boston. So it's a little bit more annoying when you have a bad show in your hometown.
And all your friends and family are there, and, you know, but you know, it was still a good show.
What does it do to you as musicians, and this is similarly applicable to you, where you saw Aerosmith and those kind of bands, and now you yourself are there? What does it do to you? Is that something you reflect on, or?
Well, yeah. Again, you know, the memories cross your mind, and you start to realize that, like, wow, I was, you know, seeing shows here when I was 13, 14 years old, and now we're the ones playing it, you know, and so it's a proud moment. But again, it can be really frustrating when it's not going great, because you know, we know this band to always play really well, and you expect that to be that. And I don't know, you know, I don't know if it's even within the crew guys sometimes, because a lot of our crew are from Boston. I don't know if it gets to them too, because they're seeing their friends and their family, and you know, I don't know if maybe they just get nervous and whatever, but you know, the band always plays pretty consistently, but you know, it can go either way.
And then in terms of the music that you make, it is a bit, let's say, louder than bands like Aerosmith were. Yet you still have your before 1,000 Horsepower, all albums ended up in the first position.
Yeah.
So what does that tell you about the music that you make and this genre of music?
What's the question?
He wants to know what, you know, even before 1,000 Horsepower, a lot of our songs, singles became #1s, and you know, what does that tell you about the band and the position that we're in?
Well, that we're tenacious, and you know, we've always believed, like I said about Sully and I, we did this way before Godsmack, and we were both drummers and in vans, like touring around the country playing to 50 people a night or 200 people or whatever, and we never quit. And you know, there might have been small jobs in between that we had to do or whatever, but we never quit. We always believed. So each time we have a single or a record that comes out and charts anywhere, you know, it gives us more of a kick in the ass to try and just reach more people and make more music, you know. Like, we're living our dream, the American dream, we call it, because, you know, Elvis started it, whatever. But to be able to play music for a living, you know, and, you know, again, it's not, people think, even my own wife thinks how we're just out here partying and it's so easy, but you know, we work our fucking asses off, and it's something that even whether we're writing, recording, touring, you know, it's work. It is work, but it's still the blessing that we grew up, you know, living for, and now we live it. So, you know, it's something that we hope to just continue on with, you know, and as we get older and we mature, you know, it's something that we feel we can continue to do as long as we're still happy doing it.
Yeah, I think everybody's pretty grateful in this band for the career, you know. I mean, and when we get, you know, big success on songs, it's a feel-good moment, you know. It makes us feel that, like, you know, that we did our job well, you know. And
I still trip out when I hear us on the radio. You know, I can remember the first time I ever heard my drums on the radio with my first band or whatever. And then to this day, you know, 30 records later, you know, 13 years in Godsmack, when I heard What's Next, our new single on the radio, I'm driving to 7-Eleven and, you know, they get some beers or whatever, and it came on and I got the goosebumps. Right. It still happens. It's still something that we grew up our whole lives trying to do, and, you know.